Good afternoon and welcome to our second guest speaker program of the fall semester. I'm Professor Henry Weinstein. Today it gives me great pleasure to present Samrah Mahmoud, who was one of our first students in our entering class in the fall of 2009, one of our first graduates. I never had the pleasure of having Samrah in a class, but her reputation around the school was more than a little impressive. As I recall, she got the highest grade in 10 separate classes while she was here. I don't know if that's the record, but if it's not, it's pretty close to it. Besides getting fantastic grades here, Samrah also did a great deal of pro bono work. She worked on the law review. And she was just an all-around terrific person to have on campus. She externed for a state appeals court judge, Richard Aronson, while she was here. And when she graduated, she got a coveted clerkship with a terrific federal judge in Santa Ana, Josephine Staten, who is still on the bench. After that, Samrah got a job with a very good law firm, Kroll and Mooring, here in Orange County. And after several years there, moved to a even bigger firm, Troutman Pepper, which she'll talk a little bit about in her remarks today. She does a wide range of business litigation in state and federal courts. She also has done some teaching here at UCI, and she is one of our very first graduates to become a partner in a law firm. So Samrah, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Professor Weinstein, and thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and to talk to everyone. So what I thought I'd do is talk a little bit about my career path and the different areas it touched, because while I've spent most of my career at a big law firm, I tried a couple of different things along the way. And then maybe spend the last half talking about the top 5 things that I learned along the way that have helped make me successful. So starting off, I grew up in Santa Ana in a single parent household. My mom was an elementary school teacher. So I didn't have any lawyers in my family or in the community necessarily that I could talk to about being a lawyer or going to law school. I kind of knew, or I at least thought early on, that maybe I wanted to go to law school. Through some either personal experiences with my family or community members, have thought that being a lawyer was a unique opportunity to be able to solve problems for people, and also to be able to navigate a system that was very difficult and confusing for most people if you didn't have sort of the inside scoop or the ability to understand the law. But I didn't head into college necessarily thinking I would end up in law school. I went into college as a theater major and did that for a bit, and then ended up as a psychology major and really enjoyed that. And right towards the end of my undergraduate, I went and did an externship at the Child Abuse Services team in Orange County. And the purpose of that organization is to allow children to report child abuse in one place. And so there's an ADA on site, and there's also psychologists on site. And so I got to see both in action. And ultimately, I decided after that externship, which I'd done for almost a year, that the legal aspects were what interested me the most and that I wanted to be a lawyer. So then I applied to law school and got into UCI Law as it was opening. And I was fortunate enough to be part of the inaugural class, which was an amazing experience. And for me, coming into law school, again, I didn't have any lawyers to talk to about what the practice of law really is. I mostly got in knowing what I knew from TV. And so being a state prosecutor and in ADA was, I think, what I had in mind as what I wanted to do. And I think I also came in with a very one-sided view of our criminal justice system, which law school really, I think, is a great thing, challenged for me. And so I would definitely encourage any students that are watching this to take advantage of all of the opportunities of externships and pro bono work and clinics and these speaker series, because honestly, actually, one of the first things that challenged that view for me was a speaker series. Professor Weinstein might remember this, but there was a man that was brought into the speaker series who had been wrongly convicted. And he'd been wrongly convicted for killing his mother. And I think he spent maybe more than a decade in prison. And LA Times reporters, if I recall correctly, actually broke the story and got him exonerated. And so for me, you know, I don't think I'd ever really, I knew people got convicted wrongly, but I think for me, that was a real eye-opening experience. And I think challenged my sort of steadfast view that I definitely wanted to be an ADA, and criminal prosecutors at this, you know, were always correct. And this was, you know, of course, if somebody got convicted, you know, it was correct. And so, you know, obviously that was a very naive view, and thankfully law school and my experiences in law school really challenged that and pushed me. And so nonetheless, I still did my first summer position at the DA's office in the sexual assault unit. And I really, you know, I appreciated the job. I thought there were some great aspects of it. I thought that they do great work there, but at the same time, I didn't think it was the right fit for me. And so coming out of that experience, I thought maybe I want to look around a little bit more. And so I took, you know, I really liked in my first year of law school some of the business-oriented classes that I took. And I started to think, well, maybe I want to look, I know I want to be a litigator, but maybe I want to look at some of the, you know, more business-oriented classes and take a look at law firms. And so I did OCI, which came up in, I think, the fall of my second year. And I had never really, like I said, I don't know that I really thought I even knew about, you know, big law firms coming into law school, but I certainly didn't think that I would necessarily end up at a big law firm. But I decided to give OCI a try. And I really spent some time thinking about the things that mattered to me so that I could focus on firms that had those components. So I knew that I wanted to, you know, I decided I really wanted to work on complex legal issues, cutting edge issues. I wanted to focus on a law firm that had that. I knew I wanted to be a litigator, so I wanted to go to a firm that had a good litigation practice at the time. And I also was interested in antitrust, knew I was taking the class, and so I was looking for a firm that had an antitrust practice. And then on top of that, there were a few other things as well. I was looking for a firm that valued both diversity and pro bono work, and not just, I think every firm will tell you that they value that, but, you know, kind of digging a little bit deeper and asking people about the kind of pro bono work that they were allowed to do with the firm, about what diversity initiatives were happening, taking a look around at the people that were at the firm to see were there diverse attorneys, not only at the associate level, but at the partner level. And so ultimately, I interviewed with several firms and felt that the right fit, I was lucky enough to get an offer from Kroll, and felt that that was the right fit at the time. And, you know, I was really excited to do my second summer there. And I had a great time there. I thought the reasons I chose the firm were all present when I got there. And so I really, you know, I think my views on big law firms changed a bit. And at the end of that summer, I decided that that was where I wanted to start my legal career. So I accepted the offer, and then came the topic of clerkships. And at the time, most of the judges were on plan, which I don't think they are now, but on plan meant that they were only hiring really, I think going into your third year, that's when you interviewed, and you couldn't apply before that. I think most of the judges are not following any sort of plan right now, but at the time, it was sort of an agreement among judges so that everybody got a fair shake at the best of the potential law students. And so I didn't know anything about clerking. I didn't really have any lawyers to talk to other than the ones that were at the school. And so I, at first, thought clerking doesn't really, like, I just wanted to get started with my career. I want to be a litigator. I want to be in court, not like behind the scenes. It doesn't sound really that appealing to me. And so I applied, I would say, half-heartedly at the school, sort of pushing. And then as I got further into the process and really talked to people, talked to professors, I started to think, well, maybe clerkships, you know, make sense. Maybe I'll have a better time than I thought. And so, you know, I applied pretty locally because I, at the time, didn't feel like I could, I felt like I had family obligations that wouldn't allow me to apply further. And I applied really just to Orange County and LA. And the first round didn't work out. I had interviews and I didn't get any of the, I didn't get any offers from any of the judges I applied to. And honestly, there was, you know, while I, by that point really wanted to clerk, there was one judge that I really, really wanted to clerk for. And when I interviewed with her, I just thought, you know, she's awesome and I want to work for her. And that was Judge Dayton. And so I, even after I got dinged, so to speak, and she sent the letter saying, sorry, can't hire you, I followed up and I sent a letter and said, I thank you for your consideration. I, you know, understand you don't have a position now, but I'd be interested in the future if a position ever comes up. So I, you know, I went about my third year. I did clinic, I did externships, I, you know, externed for Justice Aronson. And, you know, I thought at the time, well, maybe clerkships just aren't going to happen and I'm going to start at Kroll and that's okay. So I started at Kroll. I spent, I think, my first month there. And then all of a sudden I got a call from Judge Dayton and she had an unexpected opening for a clerk. And because I had sent a letter afterwards, sort of reiterating my interest and she had remembered my interview, she said, you know, I have an immediate opening. Can you start next week? And again, fortunately, I was at a firm that valued clerkships. I think a lot of them do. Some of them don't, but a lot of them do. And so I went to my supervisors at Kroll and said, I have this really great opportunity. It's with a judge in Orange County. And many of them knew Judge Dayton. And I said, would you allow me, you know, would you hold my spot if I took this clerkship? And they were really great. They said, take it, you know, we'll be here when you're done if you want to come back, and you should definitely go. So then I went to work for Judge Dayton. Clerking was, I think, the best job that I've ever had. I would highly recommend it for any students who are listening right now. I don't think I fully grasped how career changing it would be until I was there. Not only was it a great experience where I learned a lot, but I think it's the place where you can learn the quickest how to practice. I mean, law school can only teach you so much until you're in there doing the work. And obviously pro bono and externships and all of those things help you learn what it is to practice. But clerking, you actually, you know, if you're going to be a litigator, you see everything from the inside. You see how judges think about cases and how cases get decided and what makes judges angry and what good lawyering looks like. And so it was not only an amazing learning experience, but after my clerkship, when I went back to Kroll, I think it, you know, people always think I don't want to take a year out of my career. Well, I would say that I gained 2 to 3 years from that clerkship because everybody trusted me more when I came back to the firm. They knew that I had clerked for a federal judge. Fortunately, I'd clerked in the district where I was working, so my judge knew a lot of those lawyers and was able to talk to them and say, Samrah did a great job. And so she talked me up to them. And so I found that not only was I getting more complex work, but people automatically already kind of trusted that I had some implicit knowledge. And so that was great. And I ended up being able to, you know, I was put on a trial team right away for a case in the Central District before Judge Carney at the time. And, you know, from there on, I got really interesting cases, particularly ones that were in CD Cal because people knew that I knew the rules to the Central District and had practiced there. So I was at Kroll for another about 5 years until I think it was 2018. And, you know, I really enjoyed working there, had great colleagues, many of whom come from UCI Law, and really, you know, enjoyed my time there, wasn't looking. And then one of the partners that I had worked with pretty consistently decided to move over to Troutman Standard, which is now, after a merger this year, Troutman Pepper. And he moved over with a couple of, he was located in Orange County, but there were a couple of other partners from Kroll that moved over to Troutman as well. And he actually recruited me and offered me something that to me was really valuable, which was to be essentially his right hand and to basically help him build up his book of business and really be important to the client relationships that he was building. And so, after it was a very difficult decision for me, I really liked the firm that I was at, but sometimes, opportunities present themselves and you might not be ready for them, but, they're there anyway. And so I decided to take that opportunity, and now I'm at Troutman. And as part of that opportunity was also it was a sort of at least a closer look at partnership a little sooner. And so while there were nobody will ever guarantee you partnership or anything like that, there was at least an opportunity to be looked at earlier for it in the move. And so that's where the look was good, and fortunately, all of the people that supported me pulled through, and I did my best, and I made partner at the end of last year. So that's where I'm at today. My practice at Kroll was kind of a general litigation practice. I did some antitrust, some insurance defense work, and then some class action work with a bunch of other things thrown in. And then my work at Troutman is probably, I would say, about a three-parter. It's still litigation, but it's insurance, primarily insurance defense. So we come in for litigation involving coverage and bad faith claims against insurers for usually third-party lawsuits. And then, so we're not usually dealing with like homeowners or anything like that. It's usually a little bit more of there's been a big lawsuit against a company who is our insured, and so the question is there coverage under the contract, under the policy? And then I do class action defense work, and so have quite a few cases with the Telephone Consumer Protection Act and what qualifies as a violation under that. And then the third part is some healthcare defense work, usually providers suing healthcare plans. So that's my practice now. And then as Professor Weinstein said, I also have done a little bit of teaching at the university. I taught antitrust for a semester. If you get an opportunity to take that with Professor Leslie, he's fabulous. I learned everything from him, and he was the one that turned the class over to me while he was on sabbatical and then walked me through how to teach it. So it was one of the best classes I took. Highly recommend it if you're at all interested in antitrust or even just how the marketplace and business work, and what people can agree to and not agree to in terms of their business operations. And then I also co-teach a federal introduction to federal filings in California class with one of my classmates, Diana Palacios. We teach that in the intersession, and I think we may be teaching that again in January. Not sure on that, but so I guess the bottom line is that I've touched a little bit of most different areas in the law, not every area, but quite a few different ones. And I'm happy to answer any questions about that at the end, or even privately if anybody has questions. But what I thought I'd switch to now is just talking a little bit about maybe like the top 5 lessons that I've learned along the way that have helped me be successful. So the first piece of advice I would give is figure out what excites you about our profession and keep an open mind about where you might find that. As I said, I certainly didn't, I definitely didn't think that I would, oh, sorry, I see a question. Yeah, so I'll walk through, why don't I walk through the lessons and then I'll touch on that question at the end, because some of the lessons might help you learn that. So, so figure out what excites you about the profession and keep an open mind about where you're going to get those met. I didn't, think I'd end up at a law firm. I wasn't contemplating a law firm coming into law school, and I sort of had this view that law firm was this big corporation and kind of soulless, I guess. And there are probably some law firms that meet that model, but at the end of the day, you know, it's a company that you can work at, and it's made up of people, and you can certainly find law firms that are made up of, you know, that have good people that work there and do good work. And so I found I was fortunate enough to find two of those firms, and have really enjoyed my time at the firms. And what I did to figure that out was I really sat down and said, what do I care about? What excites me about the profession? And as I said, for me, I took, and I really liked dealing with complex legal issues and things that were kind of cutting edge. And a lot of times law firms get hired to handle that for the biggest companies. And often the big law firms get hired to handle that because, you know, a big company that's, you know, a Fortune 100 company wants to hire a big law firm when they've got lots of liability at stake. So, you know, I knew that that was something that appealed to me, is working on these sort of cutting edge big cases. I also knew, though, that I wanted to work at a place that valued, like I said, diversity and pro bono. So I looked for that in the firms that I looked at. And I knew that I wanted to work somewhere where ultimately the culture was a fit for me. And so, you know, different law firms have very different cultures, and different offices in those law firms have different cultures. And, you know, I guess it sounds a little privileged to say, like, your interviews with law firms are also they're not only interviewing you, but you should be interviewing them to figure out if it's the right fit. And I know that sounds a little privileged because that assumes you have sort of choices, but to the extent that you do, I would say that working somewhere that you like is important. And, you know, I would treat interviews with law firms as a little bit of you trying to figure out, is this the right fit for me? Is this the right culture? Am I going to like the people I work with? Because you spend a lot of hours at work, and making sure that you enjoy the people you're going to be doing that with is important. The second thing is, I would say find someone who can tell you the rules. So there are a lot of unspoken rules in legal organizations, particularly law firms. They can be very political. I often say that at least from what I've experienced at law firms, it's a little bit like Game of Thrones, in the sense of you want to make sure you're backing the right house, because you know what I mean by that is law firms are about ultimately the partners who bring in business and make the money for the firm. And so when you're doing, as I'll get to a little bit later, when you're doing work, you want to make sure that you're building allies who are in a position to speak for you. And I'll get to that a little bit more. But right now, I would say find someone who can tell you the rules. Find somebody who's on the inside and has the ability to tell you what you need to do, because this can, when you don't know the rules, it's a game that's pretty rigged against you. And there are a lot of, they're just, you know, each firm has its own rules for the firm, and then there are some rules about the profession. And so I'll give you an example. I would have never thought that potentially some older judges might hold it against a female litigant if they don't wear nylons and a skirt. That sounds ridiculous, but there are still some judges who probably have that mindset. And I was told that by a female partner and a mentor. And, you know, I think it's a stupid rule. And I'm not saying you have to follow every rule. You might find a lot of the rules are probably implicitly sexist or racist. And so, you know, I'm not saying know the rules and follow all of them. I'm saying find somebody to tell you what the rules are, and then figure out if they're rules that you can live with, or if they're rules that you think there's no way I want to follow that. And you know what? I don't care what the consequences are. I'm just not going to do that. And so it was important to me to find people who could give me some of those tidbits. Like, you know, maybe you should, you know, wear a skirt to a meeting with this judge or to a court appearance, because unfortunately they're going to expect that, and that's what you need to do. Or, you know, there are a lot of different rules that you could think about, how you style your hair, other things like that for women, what kind of suit you wear. And so, again, I'm not suggesting that you have to follow all of those rules. Many of them are unfair, but I always think I want to know what they are in order to make an informed choice about whether or not I'm going to follow them. So find people at whatever organization you're at that know those rules and that are willing to tell you in a safe space, and that you can ask those things honestly of, and maybe even have a discussion with them about, about whether to follow that rule or not, or how you feel about it. The third rule I would say is earn a sponsor. And I say earn a sponsor because I think a lot of people, well, first of all, mentors and sponsors are two words that you'll hear about in professions, in particular our profession. A mentor is somebody who can, a mentor is usually somebody who's a little bit closer to your age, who can tell you kind of the behind the scenes rules and advice. So your person who tells you the rules might be your mentor. It might be somebody who's a little bit closer to your vintage, or somebody who's just, maybe it might be somebody from UCI Law, if you find somebody like that in your organization that you kind of have another connection with. But a mentor is somebody who can kind of serve as your advisor on a day-to-day. A sponsor is somebody, however, who is going to put political capital behind you. And so what I mean by that is somebody who's going to back you. And again, I don't think these relationships, a lot of people think, well, like, why haven't I found my sponsor? I think that it's really a mutually beneficial relationship. And so I would say you earn sponsors, you do work that benefits that person, and they find you important, and then they in return sort of pay back your hard work by backing you. And not all sponsors are made equal. You want to find somebody who can, one, give you good opportunities. Two, will speak up for you. Three, can speak up for you. And what I mean by that is somebody might be willing to speak up for you, but again, as I said, particularly with law firms, power sort of goes with the people who have the most business. And so if you have somebody who will speak up for you and support you, but ultimately they don't have a lot of business in their name or a lot of political capital, a lot of respect from people, their word might not count as much as someone else. And then I'd say the last thing is also I factor in, like, generally find somebody who you like, and that you get along with and feel comfortable with. And so I think, as I'll talk about in sort of my next point, you have to work hard to make it, but working hard doesn't really get you all the way. Unfortunately, a lot of decisions get made when you're not in the room. And so you have to have people in that room that will speak up for you and will back you. And if you don't have that, you can work as hard as you want, but ultimately people may not know about it, or you just may not be on the radar because nobody's in there talking about you. So earn a sponsor, do hard work, good work, for somebody that you know is going to be the type of person that will will speak up for you, has the ability to do so, and somebody who will give you opportunities. And that may not be one person, right? It might be a couple of people. You might find that you have a couple of different sponsors, and maybe there's somebody who's really great at giving you really interesting opportunities that you like to work on. And, but maybe they don't have as much power in the firm. And so then there's somebody else that you want to also do work for and impress and make sure that they think of you as somebody that's important to their practice, so that they'll put their political capital behind you. The fourth thing I'd say is something that I kind of just mentioned, work smart and hard. So, when you get into organization, there's certainly, everybody has to pay their dues. And that when you come into a firm or any organization as a first year, you're not going to get the best opportunities right off the bat. You're not going to be out there arguing a motion in court, most likely, right? That's going to be somebody that's more senior. But at the same time, I think you have to do a little bit of advocating for yourself with the types of assignments you take on. So, it's people will take what they can get, and if you don't advocate for yourself, it might just be because people aren't, people are busy and they're not necessarily thinking of you. And so it's important to advocate for yourself a bit. And by that, it's a tricky, I'm going to say, admittedly, it's a very tricky tightrope to walk, because you can't, the number one rule often at firms is like, don't say no, don't turn down work, don't make somebody mad because you say, I'm not going to take that on, because then you look like somebody who's not a team player and not willing to jump in. But at the same time, I would say be active in managing your docket and try to take on work that's interesting to you. And I'll give you an example that probably, it could have gone either way for me, but one example I'll give you is after coming off my first case, which was it was a pretrial matter, we had a bench trial, it was really exciting. I did the grunt work on that team, and I earned my way up. I worked for a partner that was well respected at the firm, and not easy to please, and she spoke highly of me. And so I came off of that thinking, wow, I really want to be a trial lawyer. And the next assignment I got was basically to be local counsel on a case where it was taking up most of my time, and what I was doing is basically just handling filings. Like, I wasn't actually doing substantive work. I was literally getting filings at 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and basically pushing it through with a secretary or paralegal. And, I was certainly happy to do that for a little bit, but case wasn't going away anytime soon. And I was now at like a third year and thinking, wow, this case could last for another year and a half. And if this is all I'm doing, almost 100% of my work, like, I don't want to lose the momentum coming off of a clerkship and this trial team and do this for the next 2 years. And so honestly, at that point, I was thinking, I hadn't talked to anybody, and I thought, do I need to find a new place? And I honestly started thinking about looking for a new place, which was stupid because I hadn't even talked to anybody at the firm to say, like, this is an issue for me. What do we think? So finally, I decided to go to one of the attorneys I worked for that I respected and got good work from. And I said, I really want to be a trial lawyer, and I really want to be a litigator. And I'm concerned because I'm on this case, and I think that it can be done by a more junior attorney. I'm now a third year. I've done this trial team, and I don't want to seem like I'm not a team player, but I also want to make sure that I'm growing and making sure that I'm getting the kinds of opportunities I need at my year so that you guys will think of me when promotion time comes. And to my surprise, the partner I talked to was like, yeah, no, that totally makes sense. You know what? I have a trial coming right up, and I think you'd be great for it. So why don't I see what I can do? And from there, I ended up getting shifted to another trial team, and I actually got to do a jury trial. And so that's an example of what I mean by, it could have blown up in my face, I guess, but I do think that because I advocated for myself, I got a really great opportunity to be on a trial team. And I really tried to do it in a way that wasn't snotty and that didn't make it sound like I wasn't willing to take on hard work, but made it really about the fact that, like, this was coming to me at a time in my career where I was supposed to be learning other skills, and this wasn't serving that. And fortunately, I had people that listened to me. And so I guess my point there is had I just quit and left, that would have been a mistake at that time, clearly based on what happened. And had I not advocated, I might have been stuck doing something that really wouldn't have advanced my career and would have held me back at the end of the day. So advocate for the kinds of assignments you take on. I would say actively look for things that you want to do and like to do, and try and load your docket up with those so that there isn't a situation where it's like you're not that busy, you haven't looked for work, and so you get whatever is available. So try and be active in looking at partners and the type of work that they have and the type of work that comes in. For instance, firms will often send out like a conflicts check every day to all attorneys, and it'll show all of the new matters that get opened. Take a look at those and see what's being opened around the firm and who's opening them. And you might say, oh, look, that matter looks kind of interesting. That's a trademark case, and I really want to do trademark law. Maybe I should reach out to that partner and see if they need help. So be proactive about your career, think about what you want to do, and try and go after those opportunities when you can. And the last thing I'll say is don't be afraid to self-promote. And I mean that, again, this is a tricky rule and a careful rule. Don't do it in a humble brag way. Nobody likes that. And don't do it in an obnoxious way. Because but you do need to, as I sort of said, people are busy, right? And they're not, I mean, they're human, and they're trying to get through their day and get their work done and go home to their families or do whatever they do after work. And if you aren't talking about yourself and the things that you're doing, it may slip under the radar. And so, as awkward as it feels, nobody likes to sit there and promote themselves to people and talk about how great they are. And I'm not suggesting that you should do it in that way, but find a way to talk about the things that you're doing and the positive thing. You know, are you joining organizations out in the community? Make sure to try and slip that into a conversation with somebody. Did you just do great work on a case that you won on? Well, you know, ask. Hopefully, the partner will you know, send an email out to other people letting them know. But if they don't, maybe send the partner an email and say, is it possible to? I'd like to put together an email to people about how our team won this case. Can we do that? So, you know, there are ways to promote yourself and others along with you, because a lot of our work is, you know, most of our work is done in teams. There are ways to promote yourself and others that worked on stuff with you without doing it in an obnoxious way, but in a way that makes sure that people know what you're up to. And the other thing that I'll say is this is always easier to do through other people. And so I've been fortunate enough to work with some great colleagues, again, a lot of them from UCI Law, who I trust dearly. And, you know, they go out of their way to talk me up to people and to talk about, you know, the good things that I'm doing. And I try and do the same for them. And so it's a lot easier when you have somebody who you trust, who you work with, who's a friend, or, you know, a good colleague to be able to sing your praises and make sure that you're being promoted. And you can do the same for them. And again, that's part of the job of a sponsor. And so if you have a good sponsor, that person's probably doing that for you in the background and going around and talking to the firm or your organization, whatever organization you're in, or other people and singing your praises. But make sure that you're keeping an eye out for opportunities to promote what you're doing, to promote what your team's doing, and that people know that good work, because people aren't like sitting around looking for it. They're, like I said, trying to get through their day. So you've got to sometimes put yourself on their radar. And the other thing I would say is not just like promoting the good things that you've done, but stating your goals. It sounds, not everybody at a law firm wants to make partner, and partners generally assume some people do and some people don't. So if your goal is to make partner, make sure that you're telling people that, because people won't assume that that's your goal. A lot of people at law firms are there to bide their time for a few years, pay off loans and move on. And so if you want to make partner, if you want to be promoted to senior counsel or counsel, make sure that you're telling people that, because that's not going to be assumed. You might think it should be like, of course, everybody knows I want to be promoted. They may not. And so it's important to talk to people about that and to state your goals to them. And you know, to tell them in a way that's like, I've earned this, right? I've done the things that I need to do to get to here. I've you know, taken the steps that I need to, and I'd really like to make partner, make senior counsel. So make sure that the people that work with you and the people that are in charge know that. And then you know, the last thing is just like, it's not even a real, you know, lesson from, I would say this is more like a life lesson. Again, you work long hours at any, I haven't talked with many colleagues that don't work long hours, regardless of whether you're a big law, in the government, in a public interest organization. We all work long hours. So find people that you enjoy working with, because it makes that much more pleasant. It relieves stress when you have a team that you trust and that you can rely on and also like. So, you know, just find people that you get along with and work well with. Okay, so I did see some questions in the chat. Okay, there was a question. Can you walk us through what you had to do to be promoted to partner, the things the firm was looking for to grant the promotion? Yeah, I think it was, you know, I think different firms look for different things. So that's one thing I would say is, you know, make sure you talk to, again, a mentor or sponsor who's a partner, probably an equity partner, and talk to them about what it takes. And I will tell you that firms are not as organized as you think they are. So you might talk to 4 different partners and get 4 different answers. I think generally most firms are looking for a certain set of skills that you've gotten certain opportunities, like, you know, they don't want a partner who hasn't done depositions. They don't want a partner who hasn't appeared in court and argued a motion. So make sure that you're getting the sort of opportunities that merit that level in your practice. You know, and if you can push for things, depending, I don't know, you know, whatever your area is, figure out what are the things that are, you know, when I say they don't want a partner who hasn't taken depos, I'm obviously thinking from a litigator perspective, but if you're looking at a transactional practice or something else, there are probably milestones in your practice that are thought of as things you need to get. So make sure you're getting those things. And then the other component of it is often, I think, firms are looking for what I would call the business plan for you, or the business case, which is, okay, so we make you partner. What happens then? Do you have work that you're gonna be able to stay busy on? Is there a partner who's going to make you part of their business plan so that you're managing their book until you get to the level that you have your own business? So often they're looking for that business case at the back end, which is why another reason I say it's important to have a sponsor. Because for me, when I moved over to Troutman, it was with a partner who said, I'm going to fit you in my business plan, in my business case, and you're going to be important to my work, and I'm going to make sure that you're introduced to all of my clients, that they see you as sort of my junior partner. And you know, he made sure he did the work to show the firm that there was a plan for me once I made partner, that they weren't going to make me partner, and that I was going to be, you know, a drag on their bottom line and not have hours. Because the one thing you'll realize is once you make partner, there are clients that aren't going to want to pay for a junior partner on a case, or there are, you know, your rate goes up, so that's something to think about. And so it really, to me, the doing the good work, getting good reviews, that's like sort of the given. But the extra thing that I think a lot of people don't know about that firms are looking at is there a plan for you once you've made partner to keep busy? Do you have enough business yourself to keep yourself busy? Or is there somebody else who's going to be feeding you that work that's going to promise to do so consistently and say, this person fits in, they're going to be my right hand, and they're going to manage my business, and I have X amount of, you know, dollars and hours that I can feed to this person until they find their own way and build their own business as a partner. So that's sort of I would say the things that we had to show were, not only am I like a good lawyer, I've done the things and gotten the opportunities that I needed, people think highly of me, but also here's the plan once I make it. Okay, do you have any recommendations for how to network and connect with people in that room? Yeah, so unfortunately it is, it's hard to find, well, here's what I'd say. I don't know if this is a COVID question or a non-COVID question. During COVID, it's very hard to connect and network with people in the firm. What I would say that's been somewhat successful is, you know, I've had a couple of associates reach out individually and say, can we set up Zoom chats, like one-on-one chats or just calls, and talk, you know, about what your practice is, what my goals are, and just have a conversation. And that's been helpful to actually get introduced to some of my colleagues and say, like, oh, I'm going to think about this person in the future for work, because I enjoyed reaching out to them. I enjoyed the fact that they did reach out to me and wanted to talk to me. So you know, I think COVID's hard, but I would suggest maybe like one-on-one outreaches to people that you find interesting, that have interesting work that you'd like to talk with. In non-COVID times, I think I usually would say start with a mentor who's going to give you the sort of the skinny on who are the partners that are, you know, not only good to work for, but going to talk, you know, speak up for you if you work hard, and are going to, you know, back you when it comes down to it. And you know, when you come into a firm, you may not know who that is, or you might start to figure it out through reputation. But you know, I think what really helped me was speaking with mentors and saying, like, okay, who's like let's just like talk off the record. Who are the people that you want to work for? who are the people that are going to be good to work for, not only because, they're like decent human beings, but also that they're going to have interesting work or back me. And then from there, what I would try to do is, outreach to those people that you've identified. Send them an email and say, I'd love to, have a coffee, or, if they're in another office and you're going to be visiting that office, I'm coming to the office and I'd love to have or I'm in the area and I'd love to like have a coffee with you, or I'd love to have lunch. So I would first find a way to identify those people through mentors and others, and then set up one-on-one coffees, lunches, where you get a chance to talk to that person about what your goals are, and about how you can help them. Because nobody wants to, not that people are always willing, a lot of people are willing to help others, but I think it's an extra thing when you offer sort of your help on cases as well, because there are a lot of requests for help, but when you're offering something in return, like, I'm really interested in working on X type of cases and I'd love to be staffed on your cases and help you on those things. That's a really, for me, it personally makes it easier to do that kind of an outreach. And I think people respond to it better. Okay, next question was, how much discrimination did you face as a minority woman in the legal field, and when you became a partner, and how feasible is it for women to make partner who also eventually want to have a family? I would say that what I would say is it's never outright discrimination, right? Or it's not that it's never, but I never in my career had outright discrimination. It's like the 1,000 paper cuts, right? It's the implicit stuff. And so, for one, I think like firms think of business development in a very traditional way. I'll give you an example. I'll say one firm. I've only been at 2 firms, but one of the firms I was at, I asked if I could take out a client. They were saying, you should take out clients, take them out to a baseball game, take them out to golfing. And I said, well, I'd really like to take out one of my female potential client contacts to the spa. And, would the firm pay for admission to like Burke Williams, which is about the same price as, taking somebody to a whole day of golfing. And the response I got was like, oh my gosh, like you're asking for this luxury. And they actually, like, the response I got from somebody who was not a partner, was more of a business development manager, actually made me feel a little ashamed for asking. And I left feeling really embarrassed. And I was like, well, I don't, like, you're going to pay for golfing or a baseball game, but like the thing that I would like to do with my female clients that we would enjoy is something that you're not willing to pay for. So there are things like that. I would say that I never experienced any sort of, oh, well, you're, a woman, so like we're not gonna, there was never any outward discrimination at any place I've been, whether at a firm or elsewhere, but it's always the kind of implicit things that make it more difficult for you to rise. And it's a lot of, it's even adjusting in how you deal sometimes with opposing counsel. I had or client expectations. I had a client once ask me if the profession was too contentious for me, if I found it too contentious. And I don't know, maybe he meant it innocently, but I had to wonder if he would have asked a male colleague that question, or an older colleague. I don't know. I thought maybe it was because I was younger and a woman that he asked. And I thought, well, if he's thinking that and he has this like, dogfight case, is he going to want to hire me, who he doesn't think is like aggressive enough to handle the case for him? I'll say on that one, the partner I work with is great and gave me a really great opportunity to do a mock. We had a mock trial with like fake jurors that we actually, you pay through a vendor and they hire people on the, to come in and be your mock jurors. And the partner let me do one of the sides. So I argued the case for one of the sides in this mock exercise, but still the clients were there and watching. And they at first were like, well, this is a really expensive thing that we're paying for. Do we really want this, young woman to argue this? Like, shouldn't we have another like older attorney do it? And my partner advocated for me and was like, no, she's going to do a great job. She knows the case. She'll do it. And so I got an opportunity to really like show what I could do in front of this client. And afterwards they were like, you were great, and you have real potential to be a trial lawyer, and this is great. So so I found some opportunities, and I would say that I found ways to show people that I had what it takes, even though when they see me as a younger woman, and in my day-to-day, I hope I don't act aggressive. And so, I think they don't see that. I found an opportunity and had people help me show them that I had what it takes to do the job that we need to do. In terms of how feasible it is for a woman to make a partner who also eventually wants to have a family, I think it's feasible. I think it's feasible in the sense that firms are trying and looking harder at trying to change the way things work to accommodate that. They're not there yet, and I will say it's tougher. And I think having colleagues that you trust and that are like-minded and willing to support you and trade off with you is helpful. So, I have a team right now that I really, really appreciate, both up and down the ladder, and we support each other. And if somebody needs to go, take care of a kid, then we back that. And if somebody needs to go to a doctor's appointment, then great, go do that and we'll cover. So I think finding people that are going to cover for you and help with that helps. But at the end of the day, firms are still looking at your numbers. They're still looking at the hours you make. They're still looking at the numbers you generate. And so ultimately, that's all harder to do when you have kids and a family that you're also trying to balance. And I will say that law firms are trying and getting better at trying to accommodate people who aren't hitting those traditional numbers that are really only possible when you don't do much else other than the practice of law. They're still not great at that. And so unfortunately, it's the best advice I can give you is to try and find people to work with in teams that are at least going to be flexible and support you.
Samrah, those are all very good responses. I was going to ask you one other thing. When you were first looking at law firms, both for a summer job and then when you were going out, how much could you tell in advance about how much a firm valued pro bono work?
Yeah, so it's hard because, as I said, everybody will say they value it. And everybody will say they value diversity, right? That's like the party line that everybody understands is the correct response. I would say that a couple of things. One, like ask how pro bono hours are counted. And if people can't give you a direct answer on that, like that's probably a little indicative. So, some firms will say, you get 100 hours counted to your billable requirement, and that counts as real billable hours. Some people will say, I don't know, like if somebody says some amount might count to your billable hours, don't really know. Like that's probably a sign to you that it's not really something that firm does. And that's, I would say as a partner, that's a little easier to get around because even if the firm doesn't really do it, if you want to do it, you can do it. But as a younger associate, if the firm's not really supporting it, that's really hard then to do pro bono work if the firm doesn't really make it a priority. So I would say ask how pro bono hours get counted. Ask where they get their pro bono work. Ask if there's a coordinator and where is the coordinator located and how do they coordinate it? Because some firms have really structured pro bono programs where there's a coordinator and they send out, weekly updates about cases that are available. And that's great. And then I would also take a look and find out what kind of, hours the people you're talking to are doing. Like ask them, do you have a pro bono case right now? I'd love for you to tell me a little bit about that case. And again, if they're like, yeah, I have this great case right now that I'm working on and here's what I'm doing versus I don't really, I'm not really doing it, that might tell you a little bit that, either the firm doesn't really value it or count it in a way that makes it feasible for people to do pro bono. Because, some people I would say aren't doing pro bono, not because, they're people who don't want to help other people and don't do pro bono, but it's really difficult to do it if the firm doesn't count it in a way that makes sense because a lot of firms have a 2,000 hour requirement. And if you break that down, that's like 167 billable hours a month. And that's billable. That's not including things like administrative stuff or business development. And so if you're doing that and then also trying to do stuff that the firm doesn't count, it gets really hard to do that. So the primary thing that to me is indicative of whether pro bono is something that is really cared about is how does it count to your hours? And how is the firm giving credit to attorneys for doing it?
Great. Well, thank you very much for those detailed answers about the nuts and bolts of becoming first a young lawyer and a partner, because those are often things that you don't learn about in law school, as I'm sure you could, you could tell everyone. And just one final thing, I take it that your firm takes students for summer positions for what, after the second year?
Yes, we do, and I think we have somebody that's that was, you know, unfortunately with COVID, might have been delayed, but was scheduled for this summer. So they're definitely do OCI at UCI, and we try to have UCI Law alum do OCI, and so we're very interested in having UCI Law students apply.
Good. Well, thank you very much for coming to speak, and I hope the rest of your day goes very well, and we look forward always to seeing you here. Thanks very much.
Thanks for having me. Bye.